Van Jones, and I am with a coalition called Cut 50. We're working to safely and smartly reduce the prison population in half over the next 10 years. We've actually already done that in the United States with juveniles. Nobody knows that, but the juvenile population is actually down by 50% already. No increase in youth violence, no increase in youth crime. So we think if we can do it with the kids, we can probably do it with the adults too. So I'm going to make a few opening comments, and then I'm going to introduce a bunch of our amazing speakers, and I got drafted to be the MC, so you'll hear from me a little bit. But first, welcome. One of the things I want to talk about, oh, wonderful, see? Welcome. A round of applause for just about to brag on you, but now you can do it to your face.
Well, that'll change your story.
Exactly. Welcome. So I'm going to make a few just introductory comments, and then we'll hear from this esteemed panel. I want to say something about the recent past, about the present opportunity, and about core principles. Recent past, present opportunity, core principles. Recent past, to give you a sense of what extraordinary moment we're in January, when the new Congress was being sworn in, I work at CNN. I'm not here for them today, but I work there a lot. I was in the green room, and we were trying to figure out, about to go on air, what could we talk about that would be a common ground issue that we might actually see some progress on from the new Congress, given how polarized the town had become. And people were throwing out stuff about, tax reform, maybe entitlement reform. I said, I think it's going to be criminal justice reform. The silence was deafening in that green room as people looked at me as if I had just said, something in some strange language about Mars. I mean, it was so far off the radar screen that people just didn't even know how to tell me how wrong I was. They just kind of looked at the ground and then just changed the topic. We went out on the air and I said the same thing, and it was crickets. So as recently as January, the conventional wisdom was nothing can get done in this town, but least of all, criminal justice. Now here we are in September, just past Labor Day, and the conventional wisdom is actually the opposite. It's that the only common ground between the two parties is this issue. So much so that a miracle happened, 4 miracles happened on one day and nobody knows. Again, recent past. President Obama went to visit a prison. People said that was historic, and it was historic because no sitting president has ever gone to visit a federal prison, so that was history. But that was only 25% of the history that was made that day. The president went, that's history. The second piece of history, the other 25%, the president came out, and he didn't say, well, look, these are horrible people, they're in crime, don't do the crime, you won't do the time, this is what will happen to you, kids pay attention, these are horrible people. He actually came out and said something quite remarkable. He said, you know what, I met some of these guys in here, and frankly, essentially, they're before the grace of God, though I did some of the stuff that these folks did, but I had better support. Now that is a miraculous development for any elected official to actually identify with some of the mistakes that some young people have made and to show that level of compassion. But that still only gets you to 50% of the history. Then, the same day, no serious Republican or Democrat criticized the president for that comment. Not one. Now you think about that. This is a town where if one side put forward a bill that said kittens are cute, the other side would attack. Right? And so not one serious person on the left or the right criticized the president. And the last piece, the same day John Boehner, when asked about the Safe Justice Act and asked about criminal justice reform, said he wanted to see a floor vote on this issue. So on one day, you had the leader of the House of Representatives and the President of the United States on the same page on an issue that in January nobody said anybody was going to see progress on. So that is a context for this panel that you see here. Yeah, we are in an extraordinary moment where all sides of this debate are not just thinking in their minds maybe something can be done, but are beginning to work together. That's recent past. Present opportunity. Because of that, and because of the Safe Justice Act that you're going to hear about, and because of other legislation that you may hear reference, we could actually get something done by Christmas. By Christmas. Certainly by Easter. That would actually show America and show the country that not only can change be talked about. It used to be news just when we had progressives and conservatives just talking together. That used to be news. That's not news anymore. But if we can actually get something passed, that would be an extraordinary achievement, I think, for both sides. Last thing I want to talk about is just principles. This is a very different kind of an issue than other things that have sometimes been referred to as bipartisan, where you have 100,000 people in one party and 2 from the other party. And that's bipartisan. Well, hold on a second. You have 7,000 people in one party and 2.5 from the other party. That's not really bipartisan. Or you have massive amounts of money being spent on one side or the other, trying to buy and influence. This is a completely different type of politics because this is a bipartisanship based on principle on both sides. If we can agree on anything, we should be able to agree that we all believe in liberty and justice for all. Our kids say that every morning. Well, Republicans have been at their best the great defenders of the liberty side of that equation. Limited government, individual rights, individual freedom, individual dignity. When you have excessive incarceration, those principles of liberty get run over. And that is a principled reason for conservatives to be at the table. Not to mention, many conservatives' faith calls them to recognize the individual dignity of every human soul. So that's a principled reason. Nobody's buying Republicans to be here. Nobody's calculating for electoral advantage. There's a principled reason for Republicans to be here. And Democrats at our best represent the justice side of that equation at our best. That no outgroup should be mistreated or run over because they don't have enough money or they don't have the right gender or the right identity, the right neighborhood. And that principle is also being run over by excessive incarceration. So both parties at our best have a reason to be here to work together. And that is why you see this unusual level of engagement. And this panel represents some of the best thinking, some of the best work in the country, and I'm proud to get a chance to introduce some of our best and strongest leaders. You are first going to hear from the two, they used to call you the odd couple, now they call you the dynamic duo. The dynamic duo of criminal justice reform. Representatives Sensenbrenner and Representative Scott are here. Both of these are people who are strong in their principles and proud of their conservative and their liberal credentials and standing, and both have been willing to use their standing to try to get something done on this issue. So without any further ado, I want to bring to this microphone first Representative Sensenbrenner, a great Republican leader, a great conservative leader, and a great principled leader to talk to you about this legislation. Give him a round of applause.
Thank you very much, Van. First of all, let me apologize. I'm going to have to leave fairly promptly after speaking to you. This is kind of a confused day and kind of a confused week, particularly for those who are in the majority, as you may have read in the newspaper or heard it on the radio. Secondly, I have to dispute vigorously your comment that kittens are cute. I have 3 dogs. Yet I signed up for the Kittens our cute caucus. I would not get a big hello when I come home. You know, they probably would be growling at me and maybe lifting their leg on my leg or all kinds of other stuff like that. Please think of something else next time. First of all, let me say I'm honored to be here, and I'm happy to be here again with my colleague Bobby Scott of Virginia. We might not be the dynamic duo yet. We will be if we get this passed and signed into law. And that's what we have been focusing on like a laser. The history of this combination is kind of interesting. In the spring of 2013, Representative Scott and I were unanimously tasked by the House Judiciary Committee with leading the overcriminalization task force. This was a body that was dedicated to analyzing the overuse of federal criminal law and proposing substantive policy solutions. The lessons of the task force, combined with the work of colleagues who have come forward in recent years to shine a light on our bloated prison system, has persuaded us that we can no longer ignore this pressing issue. We must address our federal sentencing and correction systems now. Here's where the system stands today. Taxpayers spent nearly as much on federal prisons as they spent on the entire Justice Department in 1980, about $6.7 billion, and that's adjusting for inflation. More and more offenses now qualify as federal crimes. On the books today, there are 5,000 distinct federal offenses. Compare that to 3,000 offenses in 1980. Between 1980 and 2013, our federal prison population has ballooned by 800%. There has to be a better way, and there is a better way. And like many of our federal policies, we're learning from innovations in the states. You know, and let me say that unlike the federal government, where we can print up money or borrow money almost in unlimited amounts, the states require a balanced budget. And as Medicaid expenses increase, then they have to look for other places to sensibly cut state spending. And it's happened in every state in this country. And that has forced the states to look at reforming corrections policy so that they would be spending less on corrections. Those people who actually go to prison would end up being corrected while they are in prison rather than recidivizing and coming back through a revolving door, and looking at those who commit nonviolent offenses to keep them out of prison, but to have a really responsible and proactive probation system. From Texas to Kentucky to Oregon, state legislators have taken a bipartisan approach to changing their sentencing and corrections policies, focusing prison time on serious and violent offenders, strengthening their supervision practices, and dealing with certain nonviolent offenders outside of the prison walls in ways that actually prevent future crime. Because of their great work, we now know that we can have less crime and less incarceration. In Tough on Crime, Texas, which has put these kinds of policies in place in 2007, the crime rate fell 18%, while the imprisonment rate dropped by 10%. And in my home state of Wisconsin, which made the reforms in 2009, the crime rate is down 19%, and imprisonment is down by 7%. The Safe Justice Act, which Mr. Scott and I have jointly introduced, advances research-based sentencing, relief, and supervision policies borrowed from the successes in both red and blue states across the country which have been successful. The Safe Justice Act is truly comprehensive, tackling major drivers of the federal prison population at the front and back ends of the system. One, it curtails the ballooning number of regulatory crimes. Those are crimes that are pronounced by administrative regulation, never passed by Congress, but there's a catch-all penalty that is involved that is incorporated by reference. It builds off earned time proposals of my colleagues, allowing individuals who participate in job skills and education programming to earn time off their sentence. It promotes targeted sentencing for drug offenders, not with across-the-board sentence reductions for all drug offenders, but rather by making long overdue adjustments to mandatory minimums still apply to leaders and organizers who are controlling and driving the illegal drug market. It includes supervision policies that more effectively change the criminal behavior of the almost 132,000 people on federal probation and supervision. And finally, it reinvests the substantial savings of a lower incarcerated population to our law enforcement communities, giving law enforcement additional tools to do their job. Some specific items eligible for use of the reinvestment funds include individual tactical first aid kits, body armor and pepper spray, research and training in de-escalation techniques, establishment of a national center to advance training and knowledge on mental health issues in the criminal justice system, a nationwide blue alert warning system, and the funding and training on community-based policing programs. Now let me be clear, prisons are a critical tool in the fight against crime. Neither Mr. Scott nor I are advocating closing all of the prisons down, but targeting the prisons for people who commit violent offenses or drug traffickers and the kingpins and drug cartels. And we need to keep our families and communities safe from people who have committed serious crimes, and to make sure there is a price to pay for breaking the law. But the driving force behind our crime control strategy cannot continue to be locking up millions of people for as long as we possibly can. Instead, we need an approach that delivers the most public safety at the lowest taxpayer cost. That's why this bill is a win-win for everybody. It's a win for budgeteers, it is a win for the criminal justice system, but most importantly, it's a win for the American people. Thank you for your interest in this, and again, I'm sorry I can't stay for longer than now, but if you support this type of approach, please don't be bashful, because there are some folks that really don't like to have a win-win situation in this house. So thanks again. Take it away, Bobby.
Very good. Give him another round of applause. Takes a lot of leadership and courage to I want to bring the other co-conspirator, the other wing of the dynamic duo, Bobby Scott. Bobby Scott is someone who is not a newcomer to these issues at all. Back before it was a popular issue or an issue that was easy to discuss, even among Democrats, Bobby Scott was way out front and has been a leader on these issues for a very, very long time. Please welcome Representative Bobby Scott.
Thank you, Ben, for your very kind introduction. I want to thank Chairman Sensenbrenner, who is my not partner in crime, but partner in reducing crime and saving money. Our goal, as he indicated, is passage, not just doing it for press purposes or otherwise. We're trying to get the bill passed, and I think we have an opportunity and don't want to let it go by. I want to thank the Pew Public Safety Performance Project, which has been a research partner in this project. Van Jones and Cut 50, Mark Holden from Koch Industries, Tim Heaphy from former U.S. Attorney from Virginia, Bernie Kerik, who has a wealth of information based both on a state and federal level, and Dionne Wilson for her work in the field, joining us today to demonstrate that reforms in the Safe Justice Act will, in fact, make us more safe. The introduction of the Safe Justice Act hopefully has established one precedent, if it hasn't done anything else, and that is that any new crime initiative must be research and evidence-based and will actually reduce crime and save money. This is not only common sense, but it's good policy, and it will avoid the slogans and sound bites that got us in the problem of over-incarceration that we're in now. I learned a long time ago that when it comes to crime policy, you can reduce crime, or you can play politics, but you really can't do both. And for too long, we've been taking the political approach, enacting so-called tough-on-crime initiatives like mandatory minimum sentences, or slogans like 3 strikes and you're out, or rhymes like if you do the adult crime, you do the adult time. All of those things have 2 things in common. 1, they don't reduce crime. 2, they've helped overload our prisons. Our incarceration rate has gotten so bad that recent studies, including one from Pew, concluded that our over-incarceration is actually counterproductive when it comes to crime. Pew Center of the States estimates that any ratio of over 350 per 100,000 in jail today, the crime reduction value begins to diminish, and over 500 per 100,000, it actually becomes counterproductive because you're messing up so many families, you're creating so many people with felony records, you're wasting so much money that you're actually adding to crime, not reducing crime. As a result of the tough-on-crime policies, we've gone beyond 500 and over 700 per 100,000 today, for every 100,000 populations, far exceeding the world average of about 50 to 200 in jail today. We're over 700 per 100,000, well into the counterproductive range of incarceration rates. And so you can legislate out of fear, you can legislate for facts. The Justice Act reforms our criminal justice system based on facts about who is currently incarcerated, the research on what works best, and the data that we've gleaned from successful state experiences. Jim mentioned that over 30 states have reduced their incarceration rate, saving money, and at the same time have reduced crime. And so to address this crisis, our bill begins with focusing on prevention and early intervention, adopting programs, evidence-based programs that get young people on the right track and keep them on the right track so they don't get in trouble to begin with. And then we focus on law enforcement. Data shows it's not the length of the sentence that deters somebody from committing a crime, but rather the certainty of being caught. And so public safety officers get training under the legislation. And we also provide body cameras and other things that help the police community relations. In criminal law, our appetite for overcriminalization has swept in conduct that has traditionally been either punished on the state or with a civil, not criminal sanction. The bill introduced, as Jim mentioned, the regulatory crimes, many of which don't carry a mens rea or criminal intent requirement, so people are getting brought up in the criminal court for things they didn't even know were criminal offenses. To address the problem of over-incarceration, our bill creates a federal problem-solving, evidence-based drug courts, mental health courts, and others to divert nonviolent, low-level, first-time offenders from prison, providing these offenders with the help they require in addressing the underlying issues that led them to violate the law leads to a much greater return on the investment than simply locking them up, releasing them, and then waiting for them to come right back. The Safe Justice Act also reauthorizes the Innocence Protection Act to ensure that we safeguard against practices and policies associated with wrongful convictions and safeguard our community by funding initiatives that help identify and prosecute the actual perpetrators, such as expanding DNA analysis and clearing that backlog. I heard on the radio today that there's a significant initiative in dealing with the DNA backlogs, and still tens of thousands and hundreds of thousands of rape kits unanalyzed. And when you analyze them, you can find out a lot of them you just get a cold hit and find out who actually did it, somebody wandering around committing additional crimes. The bill also reforms our drug sentencing laws, particularly mandatory minimums. This is another area where the states have led the way. Fiscal year 2014, approximately 2/3 of federal drug defendants were convicted of an offense carrying a mandatory minimum, even though the data show that the vast majority of the people in federal prison on drugs are the lowest level nonviolent offenders, not the drug kingpins and leaders for whom the mandatory minimums were actually intended. Our bill restores the original congressional intent of these penalties and applies an evidence-based, state-tested policies. Once an individual is sentenced to prison, our bill ensures that they're not simply warehoused, but rather the time spent in prison is rehabilitative, and that the experience will actually assist him in re-entering society and being less likely to commit another crime. Moreover, the Safe Justice Act provides programs under the Second Chance Act so that offenders can receive resources, training, and help they need to make that successful transition. State experience and research demonstrate that unless we invest in the research-based methods to address the underlying issues, we can't be surprised if the cycle of recidivism continues. And finally, the bill addresses an unnecessary incarceration for people who are on supervised release. The nonviolent technical violations often result in reincarceration for a couple of months. What happens in a couple of months? You lose your job, you lose your apartment, you come out as a convicted felon looking for a job, and the cycle continues. So as I've indicated, the provisions of the bill will reduce crime and save money. What is even more significant about the initiatives is that the programs that cost money are funded by reinvesting the money that is saved into the programs that cost money. This is important because we're in tight budget constraints, and we know that there's a bill in the Senate, for example, on body cameras. They've costed it out, it's cost $100 million. Well, they're scrambling around trying to find $100 million, and obviously they're going to have a lot of trouble. Our bill involves funding for body cameras, but it's funded by savings when people aren't serving the mandatory minimums. You convert that, and so the bill essentially pays for itself. And so that's an advantage in the comprehensive bill like the Safe Justice Act. The billions saved by reducing over-incarceration are earmarked for reinvestment. Those investments would obviously include the prevention initiatives, body cameras, community-based policing, de-escalation and mental health training, DNA analysis, prison recidivism reduction programs, and others that otherwise would not be able to be funded if they weren't part of a comprehensive bill. This bill has broad bipartisan support because it reduces crime and saves money. Even in this Congress, you ought to be able to agree on reducing crime and saving money. And the passage of the bill will invest in crime prevention, reduce overreach in the federal criminal code, improve policing, reform sentencing, improve rehabilitation in our prisons, and will reform our criminal justice system in one that is safe, accountable, fair, and effective. Thank you very much.
I think I know a lot about this stuff. Every time he talks, I'm writing down more stuff. Really, really appreciate your leadership and your clarity. I'm going to bring one of my good friends to the stage now, but before I do, I have two boys, two sons. One's 6, one's 11. They fight all the time. All the time. And they fight so much that sometimes, even when they agree, they keep fighting. And, my wife and I say, do you guys actually know that you're fighting now just because you fight? That is a dynamic that can sometimes set in, where there's so much discord, people fight so much about so many things that even when some absolutely obvious thing emerges that you could agree on, you just can't even see it. And I think criminal justice has been one of those areas, and one of the great joys of my life, and one of the great revelations for me this year was coming to this town 7 or 8 months ago and actually finally meeting Mark Holden from Koch Industries and realizing, though we disagree on many, many things, there are some very, very deep things that we passionately agree on. And I've gotten a lot of stuff, a lot of crap, and you've gotten a lot of crap for, how can Van Jones and Koch Industries work together? But I say it every time, this is my brother from another mother. We have a different politics of the head sometimes. We have the same politics of the heart. Please bring to the stage and recognize Mark Holden from Koch Industries. Oh my goodness, I'm sorry. So listen, Mark is going to talk, but we actually have the great Sheila Jackson-Lee who just walked in here. Please stand up. Give her a round of applause. One of our great ladies. Welcome.
Thanks, Van. I'm excited to be here, honored to be here, and I'm really excited because Van said that it was a positive experience to come here and meet Mark Holden. I think that's the first time ever anyone said that. This is an historic day. So, but in all seriousness, thank you very much, and thank you to Representatives Sensenbrenner and Scott for their leadership on these issues, and for Congresswoman Jackson Lee as well. Thank you for their longstanding support and work for equal justice for all. And as Van said, we come at this issue with not a long history of agreeing on things, perhaps, but this one we agree violently, so to speak, and we're going to fight hard for it. And he's a good man, and I think that this has taught, at least me, a lot about working with people who I don't know very well and prejudging what they might think of certain things. And I think that that's been a valuable lesson for me at Koch as well. And I very much valued working with Van and others, Center for American Progress, you name it, across the board on both sides. So I want to start with a Thomas Jefferson quote. And he said that the most sacred of the duties of the government is to do equal and impartial justice to all its citizens. So we've really failed in that sacred duty, I would say. We've got a two-tier justice system, and if you're rich and you're connected, you're going to probably be okay. And if you're poor, regardless